here we are. There is currently a writer's strike going on in Hollywood. The WGA and the studios could not come together on a deal for the next few years, so everything's about to go dark. Whether it's studios or TV shows, whatever you're currently watching, don't expect to see any new episodes anytime soon.
Bing bong!
Now, of course, you've got the arguments from the studios saying, like, hey, don't worry about it. We've got plenty of stuff in the tank. But, there's a decent chance that some of that stuff is potentially things that they didn't really ever want to have to put out in the first place. And now their hand is going to sort of kind of be forced. Now, naturally, I'm a very anti-corporate guy, so I sort of just default to siding with the union. But I got to be honest, I think that a lot of the requests that they're making are not that unreasonable. And you've got to understand that most of the time, the union is the side that doesn't really have nearly as much money as the studios, who are clinging to every last million, billion of dollars. They don't want to have to give up anything. There are a few key points about what is happening right now. There are discrepancies on both sides about how much writers should get paid, specifically new writers, people that have been on shows for a while. There are disagreements about how long writers should be hired for at a minimum, and whether or not there should be a minimum for writing staffs on TV shows. Now, studios have pointed out the fact that there are a lot of shows that are technically written by just one person, but that is not necessarily the truth. Most of the time, even if you only see one person listed as the writer on a TV show, they typically had a staff. Whether they're just throwing ideas out there or making little edits along the way, most shows have a team of writers, and whoever writes the majority of the script is credited with being the writer of that episode. And the same thing happens with movies. Essentially, somebody could write a movie and sell it to a studio, and the studio hires somebody else to rewrite a decent amount of the script, 50 to 60%, and if that person rewrites that much of it, then they get to slap their name on the script as the writer, and the original person, gone. I realize that sounded kind of threatening. The person is still alive. They're just not listed as the writer of the movie anymore. And one of the examples of this that the studios have thrown out there is Mike White, the guy who wrote and created The White Lotus, and essentially has written every single episode. But I would be stunned if it turned out that Mike White was literally the only person involved in writing every episode of White Lotus. Think back to any TV show or movie you enjoy. When you're looking at the opening credits or the closing credits and you see a writer listed, even if it's the only name listed, there is a very good chance 10, 15, 20 people helped put that story together. But there is one key issue here that I think is going to prevent both sides from coming to an agreement for a very long time, because this is a very new issue. And it sort of depends on whether or not you think it could be a problem or if it's fine. Basically, the WGA is worried that studios are going to start using AI to take over some of the writing jobs. Now, they're not phrasing it in that sense, and studios are not phrasing it in that sense either, but studios are also not arguing that that's not true. They basically come out and said, like, yeah, we're not going to do that right now, but there's a decent chance in the future at some point that, yeah, we might have our movies and TV shows just written by AI. Now, I totally get it. The point of a corporation is to make as much money as possible, and if you could cut corners and not have to pay a team of 10, 15 writers to write something, and instead could just go on ChatGPT, enter what you want the movie to be about, what sort of vibe you want it to have, and they just spit out a 100-page script for you, why wouldn't you do that? We've seen this recently in the music industry, where we've seen a lot of AI Drake. We've seen Biggie Smalls and Tupac coming back and covering current songs. And it's interesting because usually these rules and laws are enacted in a reactive way. It's very rare that a rule is put in place to be proactive, to prevent something that isn't really an issue yet, but potentially could be. So the WGA going out and saying that, hey, we think this might actually become a problem in the not so distant future, because again, remember, these are 3-year contracts. So the WGA is basically arguing that the use of AI is progressing so quickly that if they don't put something in place right now, in 3 years or less, this could become an actual issue for the people in the union. I'm going to be completely honest. I agree with the union. I think that in terms of writers, this could actually be a problem. If you have not heard any of the AI Drake, the original Drake songs that have come out recently, go scroll through the comments. They are filled with people saying, this actually sounds like Drake. Drake should use this track. Drake should hire this ghostwriter. Drake should just put this out with his own name on it. It is crazy to see how quickly AI is becoming a force in an industry that basically right now has no idea how to handle it. And so now we're seeing another industry who's basically taken note of what's happening. They're attempting to get a handle on it now before it potentially starts to affect them. Now, here's what could really make this a sticking point. While the WGA does not want studios to be able to use AI to effectively replace their writers, they are arguing that their writers should be allowed to use AI when it comes to certain amounts of writing. Now, I really don't know how I feel about this, because on one hand, writing TV and movies is really, really hard. talk to any of these writers, you hear any of their interviews, they are working around the clock, they are working super late nights, and people complain all the time about how there are no more original ideas. Well, imagine the amount of intimidation when you're staring down the barrel of using AI. I'm really not sure how I feel about the writers themselves profiting off of the use of AI. Like I said, they definitely deserve to have a slightly easier go of it when it comes to being creative, but this goes back to the AI art thing. Does it count as your own creativity to profit off of if it's really technically not you creating it? So at this moment, both sides are very far apart. They're far apart on pretty much all of the core issues that each of them is arguing is super important in order to get a deal done. But I really think that this AI issue is going to become a serious sticking point. If we're talking about this now, when these contracts are 3 years long, imagine what the next one is going to look like. How are you going to rein something in that is advancing so quickly that it's already being listed as an issue for a 3-year contract? I am interested to see what happens. It is really cool to see that a lot of these shows, talk shows, hosts, whatever, are going dark. They're not doing any more episodes. They're going to pay the writers while this strike goes on. But given how serious some of these disagreements are right now, I would not expect to see anything resolved anytime soon. I think it's also really interesting that this is happening to basically a new generation, because back in 2007, this same thing happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. My favorite shows just all of a sudden had a season that was half as long. The Office had a 10, 12 episode season, Family Guy, 30 Rock, all of these shows got hit because the writers just were not doing any more episodes. And it went on long enough to basically completely hamstring entire seasons of TV shows. So if you're somebody that's kind of sitting back right now, not really understanding what's happening, just know that there is a very good chance this goes on for so long that whatever show or movie you're looking forward to, or a new season of something, don't expect to see that season anytime soon. And whatever season you're currently watching, that shit might be over real quick.